Before this story begins, let us take a moment to remember the true meaning of Good Friday, a day of sacrifice, sorrow, and the greatest love ever shown. This is not just a story of pain, but a reflection of grace, mercy, and the love of Jesus Christ for the world. As we watch these moments unfold, may our hearts be filled with reverence, gratitude, and remembrance of his sacrifice on the cross. On a quiet and heavy night, when the world seemed asleep and unaware, Jesus Christ walked slowly into the Garden of Gethsemane, his heart filled with deep sorrow and burden, because he knew that the hours ahead would bring betrayal, suffering, and the cross. Yet even in that moment of pain, he chose to kneel down and pray, asking God if there was another way, but surrendering completely by saying that not his will, but God's will should be done, showing a love and obedience greater than fear. As the silence of the night was broken by the sound of footsteps and the glow of torches, a crowd of soldiers approached, led by Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' own disciples, who stepped forward and greeted him with a kiss, turning a symbol of love into an act of betrayal. And even in that painful moment, Jesus did not resist or show anger, but accepted what was happening with calm strength, allowing himself to be taken. As the night grew colder and fear began to spread, the disciples who once walked boldly with Jesus Christ scattered into the darkness, trying to protect themselves from danger, and among them was Peter, who had once promised with full confidence that he would never leave his master, no matter what happened. Yet when he was questioned by others near the fire, fear took hold of his heart, and he denied knowing Jesus not once, but 3 times, his voice trembling as he tried to distance himself from the truth. And in that painful moment, the weight of his words began to sink in, leaving him filled with regret and sorrow. After enduring a long and painful night filled with false accusations, mockery, and injustice, Jesus Christ was brought before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, standing quietly in the midst of chaos, his face marked by suffering yet filled with a calm and unshaken peace. While Pilate questioned him again and again, searching for truth and trying to understand the accusations made against him, yet finding no guilt worthy of death, realizing that this man before him was innocent. But outside, the crowd had already made their decision, their voices growing louder and more aggressive with each passing moment, shouting and demanding that Jesus be crucified, their anger rising like a storm. And although Pilate felt the weight of injustice and even tried to release him, the pressure of the crowd and the fear of losing control led him to surrender to their demands, choosing the path of compromise instead of truth. And in that moment, an innocent man was condemned, not because he was guilty, but because the voices of the crowd were stronger than the voice of justice. After the decision was made, Jesus Christ was handed over to the Roman soldiers, and what followed was a moment of intense cruelty, as they began to whip him without mercy, each strike delivered with force and anger, tearing into his flesh and leaving deep wounds across his body. And though the pain was unbearable, beyond what any human could endure, Jesus did not resist, did not fight back, and did not speak words of anger, but instead remained silent, allowing the suffering to continue, showing a strength that was not physical, but deeply spiritual, a strength rooted in love and purpose. And as the soldiers continued, their actions revealed the harshness and darkness of human cruelty. Yet at the same time, it revealed something even greater, the depth of his sacrifice. Because every moment of pain he endured was not meaningless, but part of a greater plan, a choice he willingly accepted. And though his body grew weaker with each strike, his purpose never changed. And even in that moment of suffering, he carried within him a love that refused to turn away, a love that chose to endure, knowing that this path would lead to something far greater than the pain he was experiencing. After the brutal whipping, when his body was already weakened and wounded, Jesus Christ was subjected to even deeper humiliation by the soldiers, who were not satisfied with the suffering they had already caused. And so they gathered together and twisted a crown out of sharp thorns, pressing it down onto his head with force, causing the thorns to pierce his skin as blood began to flow down his face. Yet instead of seeing his pain, they mocked him, calling him king, placing a robe around his shoulders and bowing before him in a cruel and sarcastic way, striking him again and again while laughing, turning what should have been a symbol of honor into one of humiliation. And in that moment, the contrast was powerful, because though they mocked him as a false king, he truly was a king, not of earthly power, but of love, mercy, and sacrifice. And even as the pain continued and the insults grew louder, Jesus did not respond with anger or hatred, but remained silent, carrying the suffering with a calm and steady presence, showing a strength that could not be broken by cruelty, a dignity that could not be taken away, and a love that remained unshaken even in the face of humiliation, revealing that his mission was not about proving power, but about giving himself fully, even when it meant enduring the deepest pain and rejection. After enduring the pain of the whipping and the humiliation of the crown of thorns, Jesus Christ was forced to carry a heavy wooden cross upon his already wounded and weakened shoulders. And as he began to walk through the crowded streets, every step became a struggle, the weight of the cross pressing down on his body, making it harder to move forward, and the wounds on his back adding to the unbearable pain. And as he walked, he stumbled and fell to the ground, the cross crashing down with him. Yet even in that moment of weakness, he did not remain there, but slowly rose again, gathering what strength he had left, and continued forward, step by painful step, showing a determination that went beyond physical strength, a determination rooted in love and purpose. And as he moved through the streets, the crowd surrounded him, some watching with tears in their eyes, feeling compassion for his suffering, while others mocked him, shouting cruel words and laughing at his pain. Yet through it all, Jesus did not turn back, did not give up, but continued walking the path set before him, knowing that this journey, though filled with suffering, was leading toward a sacrifice that would carry meaning far beyond that moment. And with each step, he showed that true strength is not found in avoiding pain, but in continuing forward even when the weight feels impossible to bear. As Jesus Christ continued his painful journey through the streets, carrying the heavy cross upon his wounded shoulders, the crowd around him began to grow larger, filling the path on both sides. And within that crowd were many different kinds of people, each reacting in their own way to what they were witnessing. Some stood in silence, unsure of what to believe, watching with confusion as the scene unfolded before their eyes, while others were deeply moved, their hearts filled with sorrow as they saw his suffering, tears falling as they realized the pain he was enduring. And yet there were also those who mocked him, shouting harsh words, laughing, and treating the moment as if it were nothing more than a spectacle, revealing the harsh reality of human nature, where compassion and cruelty exist side by side. And in the middle of all these voices, Jesus continued forward, not reacting to the praise or the insults, not turning toward the crowd in anger or seeking comfort from those who wept, but remaining focused on the path ahead, showing a calm and steady determination, as if nothing could distract him from the purpose he had come to fulfill. And in that moment, the crowd became more than just people watching. It became a reflection of humanity itself, showing how differently people respond when faced with truth, suffering, and sacrifice. When they finally reached Golgotha, the place known as the place of the skull, where many had faced death before, Jesus Christ was brought to the final moment of his suffering. And there, in front of the watching crowd, He was laid down upon the wooden cross, his already wounded body pressed against the rough surface. And as the soldiers prepared for the act, nails were driven through his hands and his feet, fixing him to the cross with a force that echoed through the air. And though the pain was beyond what words could describe, he did not resist or cry out in anger, but endured it in silence. And then the cross was lifted up and placed into position, raising him high between heaven and earth, exposed before everyone, as the crowd stood watching, some in silence, some in sorrow, and others in mockery. And in that moment, as he hung there in deep suffering, struggling for every breath, the scene was not just one of pain, but of purpose, because though it appeared as defeat, it was not the end, but the fulfillment of something far greater, a sacrifice made willingly, not forced, a moment where love chose to remain even in the face of unimaginable suffering. And as time passed and the weight of the cross pressed upon him, every breath became more difficult, yet he stayed, showing that his strength was not in escaping the cross, but in enduring it, revealing a love that would reach far beyond that moment and touch countless lives. As Jesus Christ hung upon the cross, enduring pain beyond what words could describe, every breath becoming more difficult than the last, and his body weakened from everything he had already suffered. In that moment, when anger, pain, and despair could have taken over, he chose something completely different, something that no one expected, as he lifted his eyes toward heaven and spoke words that would echo through time, asking God to forgive those who were hurting him, saying that they did not fully understand what they were doing. And in that moment, surrounded by cruelty, mockery, and suffering, he responded not with hatred, not with anger, but with forgiveness, showing a love so deep and powerful that it could not be broken even by pain. And as the crowd stood watching, some mocking and others silent, those words carried a meaning far greater than that moment, revealing that true love is not just shown when everything is easy, but when it chooses to forgive even in the face of injustice. And as he remained on the cross, holding on to that compassion, it became clear that this was not just a moment of suffering, but a moment that would define the meaning of sacrifice, mercy, and unconditional love for all time. As the hours passed and the weight of suffering continued to unfold, something unusual began to happen as the sky slowly started to change, and what was once light began to fade into darkness, until a deep and heavy shadow covered the entire land, creating a moment that felt beyond natural, as if the world itself was responding to what was taking place. And as the darkness spread, a strange and overwhelming silence filled the air, the noise of the crowd growing quieter, the movement slowing, as though everything had paused. And in that moment, it felt as if creation itself was mourning, as if the earth, the sky, and everything within it recognized the significance of what was happening. And as Jesus Christ remained on the cross, the darkness became a powerful symbol, not only of sorrow and suffering, but of the weight of that moment, a moment where something unseen and eternal was taking place, something that could not be fully understood by those watching, yet deeply felt. And as the darkness lingered, it created a stillness that carried both grief and meaning, reminding everyone that this was not an ordinary event, but a moment that would forever change the course of history. As the darkness remained over the land and the weight of the moment grew heavier, Jesus Christ, still hanging on the cross, reached the final moments of his earthly life. His body weakened, every breath becoming slower and more difficult. And yet, even in that state, he remained fully aware of the purpose he had come to fulfill. And as the time came, he cried out with a loud voice, declaring that it was finished, not as a sign of defeat, but as a declaration that everything he had come to do was now complete. And in that moment, he gave up his spirit, and as he did, something extraordinary happened. The earth began to shake. the ground trembling beneath the feet of those who stood watching. And inside the temple, the great curtain that separated the holy place was torn from top to bottom, not by human hands, but as a powerful sign that something had changed forever, that the barrier between God and humanity had been broken. And as the people witnessed these events, fear and awe filled their hearts, realizing that this moment was unlike anything they had ever seen, a moment that carried a meaning far beyond what they could fully understand, marking the completion of a sacrifice that would echo through all generations. At the very moment when Jesus Christ gave up his spirit, the stillness of the darkened sky was suddenly broken as the earth began to tremble violently, the ground shaking beneath the feet of everyone who stood there. And what had been a moment of heavy silence quickly turned into one of fear and chaos, as rocks split apart and the earth itself seemed to react to what had just taken place, creating a scene that felt powerful and overwhelming, far beyond anything natural or expected. And as the ground continued to shake, people began to panic, some falling to the ground, others running in fear, realizing that this was not just an ordinary event, but something far greater, something that carried a deep and unseen significance. And in that moment, the power of what had just happened became impossible to ignore, as if creation itself was bearing witness, responding to the death of Jesus Christ. And as the shaking slowly began to settle, a sense of awe and fear remained, leaving those who witnessed it with a realization that this moment would never be forgotten, a moment where everything seemed to change, even if they did not yet fully understand how or why. After the chaos had settled and the trembling of the earth had come to an end, a deep and heavy silence filled the air, and those who loved Jesus Christ came forward with hearts filled with grief and sorrow, still trying to understand how everything had happened so quickly. And as they gently took his body down from the cross, every movement was slow and careful, filled with emotion and respect, as if they were holding onto the last moments they had with him. And as they held him, tears flowed freely, their hearts broken by the loss of the one they had followed, trusted, and loved. And the weight of that moment was overwhelming. As they prepared his body for burial, wrapping him in cloth with great care, and carrying him to a tomb carved out of rock, a place that now felt filled with sorrow instead of peace. And as they laid him inside, the reality of what had happened became even more real, a moment where hope seemed distant and everything felt uncertain. And yet, even in their grief, there was a quiet sense that this was not just the end, but part of something greater, something they could not yet fully understand. As the day came to an end and the light slowly faded, those who had buried Jesus Christ stood in silence, their hearts heavy with sorrow, watching as a large stone was rolled in front of the tomb, sealing it completely. And in that moment, it felt as though everything had come to an end, as if hope itself had been closed behind that stone. And as the guards took their place and the area grew quiet, a deep stillness filled the air, unlike anything before, a silence that carried both grief and mystery. And as people slowly walked away, their minds filled with confusion and sadness, they could not yet understand what this moment truly meant. And though it appeared to be the end of the story, something greater was quietly beginning, unseen and unknown, hidden within that silence. And while the world rested in sorrow, waiting in the darkness, the truth remained that this was not the end, but a pause before something that would change everything forever. Though for now, the tomb remained sealed, and the world remained still, holding its breath in the quiet. Good Friday is not just a day to remember pain, suffering, and sorrow, but a sacred reminder of the greatest love ever shown to humanity. It is the day when Jesus Christ willingly endured the cross, carried the weight of suffering, and gave his life out of deep and unconditional love for the world. Every wound, every moment of pain, and every drop of blood reflected his mercy, grace, and sacrifice. He bore the burden of sin and suffering so that mankind could know forgiveness, salvation, and the hope found in God's love. On this holy day, we are reminded that Good Friday is not only about the cruelty of the cross, but about the power of love that chose sacrifice. In the midst of darkness, rejection, and grief, Jesus revealed a love that never turned away. His suffering was not meaningless. It carried a message of compassion, redemption, and peace for every heart. As we reflect on Good Friday, may we remember the depth of his sacrifice, be thankful for his endless mercy, and hold close the truth that the cross will forever stand as a symbol of love, forgiveness, and grace.